Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Dating After Divorce podcast. I have another special guest in the Zoom room today. I want to introduce you all to Cledra Gross. Cledra is a certified life coach, business strategy. She is focused on helping Christian women make more money. Yes, we're here for that. And have a better life without compromising their values or their health. Cledra is the author of Rewrite Your Story and Becoming a Successful Coach. Welcome, Cledra. It's such a pleasure to have you here today.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. Can't wait.
Oh my goodness, I can't wait. I have not heard your story. I just heard I have just like the little highlights. So I'd love to have just like my own reaction right here on the podcast. So thank you for being here. We appreciate it. And tell me a little bit more about like, how did you get into like your work as a coach? Like what brought you there?
My work as a coach came from the unraveling of my life, my dream life. Yes, which fits to
which is exactly what we're here to talk about.
Which is exactly what we're here to talk about. And so,
awesome.
Yes, absolutely. I was in the corporate space and I was on the executive leadership team for women, and they brought in a life coach. A lot of us were getting divorced and we had climbed that corporate ladder and, checked those boxes, but our personal lives were not going that well.
Yeah.
And I had never even heard of a life coach until they brought her in. And so I hired that particular woman, and the rest is history, as they say.
Yes,
right?
Yes, so good. Well, right. Yours is a more classy story about how I got into coaching. I hired, my first coach was a guy on YouTube who talked about narcissistic abuse. He's awesome at it. But like I was following him from like way back when he would come on YouTube in his wife beater.
Oh, that's too funny. Okay.
He's like
the way we get to this work, right?
His tiny apartment in Asia. And then when he put out his first course, I was like, yeah, sign me up for that. Because you know about narcissists and
you're in. Okay.
That's how I got started.
I love it.
So good. Yeah, just, gratitude for all the people on
all
YouTube,
the people,
everywhere.
The wife beater people too. Yes. All the people. Yes.
Yeah. Awesome. So tell us about your first marriage. You are remarried, you're divorced, remarried. And of course, we know like that happens when the first marriage falls apart. Like what was that marriage like and what led to the divorce?
Sure. So, as I mentioned, I was a check the box person. I grew up in a Christian home, and marriage was the natural progression in my early 30s. And he had on paper everything I thought. And I had a clear agenda for that marriage of 3 boys, a house in the cul-de-sac, because everyone was going to come to my house. You know how you have the house that all the kids come to? That was going to be my house.
Yep.
And so for the first time in my life, I was faced with something that I couldn't work hard to do, and that was get pregnant. And so we had taken $25,000 out for our first round of in vitro, and it didn't work. And again, I had been a top performer, go-getter my whole life. So the idea that you could actually work hard at something and it fail was my first introduction to that. And shortly after that, in vitro failed. You have to wait in between cycles. Anyone who's been through it, you feel like a lab rat. I mean, you're poked and prodded and to the point where my arms were like blue. There was so much blood that they were taking. And so went through all of that, it failed. And then a couple of months later, I got the phone call that I'll never forget. And they were like, Cledra, well, I had a different last name. And they said, you're pregnant. And yes. So for me, I was on cloud 9. And so fast forward, at that point, I was 37 and considered advanced maternal age, AKA old lady. I did not know that 37 was considered old to have a baby.
Geriatric babies.
Geriatric baby at 37. Exactly. And so I had to go to a lot of checkups. But anyway, long story short, Mother's Day 2007 was my last sonogram for my baby boy. I was so excited. And I went in and there was no heartbeat. And so the worst day of my entire life. And so
how many weeks again?
This was my last sonogram.
So 36, 37?
Yeah. So it was a hard time, to say the least. I like to say, I wish I could come up with another word other than hard. You know, in my book, I say it's like a tsunami where I just felt like my entire soul was being ripped apart.
Yeah.
And so in terms of my marriage, strain on my marriage, but I had also gone through infidelity with my marriage, but Christian home, I felt like, again, I'm that hard worker. You can get over everything. And I still believe that to this day, for the record. I still believe marriage can survive infidelity. And so shortly after the memorial service for our son, my husband sat me down to tell me he was seeing someone else. And this was a seeing someone else again. It wasn't the first time.
Yeah.
And I like to say that because I do believe in fighting for marriage and recovering from, what can be recovered from in the absence of abuse, domestic violence. I certainly don't subscribe to that. So I'll never forget, I was just on the bed one day, just crying, praying to God. And I was like, why are you doing this to me? And I felt in my spirit, he was like, I'm not doing this to you. You're doing this to you. That it was my free will that I was choosing to stay with this man. And it was at that point that I filed for divorce. Yeah.
So you were still grieving your baby.
Absolutely. Absolutely, my baby. And then, okay, so 90 days, it was my husband. And then 90 days from then, my job, they were going to dissolve it and I would need to relocate. So in like 6 months, every major category of my life had been interrupted. So this beautiful home, we had built this dream custom built home in the cul-de-sac. And you know how you have these ideas of the baby room and all of that. So I was in this giant house by myself and incredibly depressed. And first time like I said, I was the person people asked for advice. I was the A student, and the go-getter. And for the first time, I found myself watching my friends get everything I prayed for. And I was pregnant at the same time with a lot of other women. In your 30s, that's what happens. A lot of us get, that's when we start our families. And so it was for the first time I felt like everyone else was going one way and God was like, no, you're going to get off right here and go a whole different way into very much the wilderness of my soul.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I stopped getting the invitations to the baby showers and they would say, we would invite you, but understand. And I was in a family subdivision and I would watch people go to the baby showers to the left and the right of me. And it was excruciating.
Yeah.
Excruciating.
And I have so many questions. I don't even know where to begin because I think back to my experience. I went through divorce. I thought that was excruciating.
Oh, absolutely.
I would never use the word devastating or excruciating for my experience. And of course, we're not comparing experiences, but there is a level of this is a whole big, gigantic thing. And I think back to how people responded and how when you said you weren't invited to the baby showers and did you have community? Did you even have someone that understood during that time?
My closest friend at that time, we were pregnant at the same time. And our relationship became very strained because she went on to have a little girl. I mean, her little girl's 16, beautiful girl now. But at that time, I didn't have the ability, the capacity to see the joy in her life. And she was honest with me and she would complain sometimes about not being able to sleep because the baby was crying. And I was like, well, at least you have a baby. And she said, I have a right to complain. And we just realized that our relationship couldn't continue at that time. And so, no, I didn't. I was a workaholic, admittedly. And so I did not have a great support system. And my therapist that I was seeing at the time, because I had to carry my son a little bit longer, even though he had expired, they had to give me this medication to shrink him to the point to get him out where I wouldn't have to have a hysterectomy. And so I was still going in to get sonograms, but success for me at that time medically was that his body was smaller. Yeah. And so I was required during that time to see a therapist. And the therapist told me, Cledra, your support system, you've built a support system where people depend on you. And you right now don't have people who are used to listening to you.
Yeah.
I was the shoulder, I was the ear, other than
Yes.
this one particular girlfriend where we were pregnant at the same time, but then our lives had taken a drastically different path. And it was painful for me to hear her talk about her baby. Literally painful. And my body was hurting anyway. And then my
Yeah.
marriage. And then I had to find at the time I was in North Carolina and I had the choice to go to Atlanta or Philadelphia. And I chose Atlanta. So I was having to lose everything I'd ever hoped for that really mattered, I will say. Because I have an amazing mom and she had an amazing mom and she had an amazing mom. So if you're keeping track,
Yeah.
I have lived long enough to know I've had a life where I knew my great grandmother on my mother's side.
Mm.
So wonderful lineage of mothers. And so one of my deepest dreams was to be a mother.
Yeah.
And so my identity shattered around that. My parents, before my dad passed, were married 45 years. Their parents were married 55 years. And so now divorce.
Mhm.
And so instability is an understatement, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah. And I think there's a stress scale, like the Reiki
Oh,
stress
I
scale.
was
And
on the top of all of them. Right.
you had
My
like
therapist
all of
said
them
that
happening at the
all
same
of them,
time.
a
And
job, a divorce, and a
physically,
baby. Oh,
and then
yeah.
physically still having to go in and,
Yes. Yes.
go through these procedures.
Exactly. And I was in pharmaceutical sales at the time. So I had to be on during the
Yeah.
day in front of doctors trying to sell my product. And because I had this giant house that I got in the divorce, so I had to pay for it. And
Mm.
so I had the financial responsibilities, the psychological responsibilities. Looking back, I know that it was just the grace of God that I even made it.
Girl,
Just the
I
grace,
feel
the grace
like
of God.
I have no, usually I'm like chatty and have lots of questions on the podcast. I'm just like,
It was the grace of
how?
God. Yes, the grace of God. Yeah.
Wow.
I look back and it was one day at a time. And, but the hope that I want everyone to have is that I have an incredible life now.
Hmm.
And the way that experience expanded me emotionally, psychologically, I like to say, you're looking at a woman where the worst happened and I made it.
Yes.
And when you have survived the worst, when how people say, don't imagine the worst because it seldom happens. I never say that. I say, imagine that if you do survive the worst, who you will be.
Mm.
And so for some people, divorce is the worst. And I want you to know there's hope after that.
Mm-hmm.
That as long as you have a pulse, I like to say, before I met my current husband, hearing my son's heartbeat was one of the best days of my life. And you'll see hearts, like you see, I'm wearing love now. I have hearts all over to remind me that the pulse is the most beautiful thing. And as long as you
Yes.
have that pulse, you have possibilities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
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 Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So
So,
good. Like
yeah,
every day can be a brand new day as long
that
as you're breathing
pulse,
and your heart is
that
beating.
pulse. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. That pulse is your hope. If you have nothing else, because you don't control that pulse, you're not making that beat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I don't know your personal belief, but it's like something's making that beat.
Oh
Beat.
yeah. No.
I know it's God for me, but whatever you believe, but that's
Yeah.
what I believe is
100. No, 100%. None of us is beating our hearts.
you're not beating your heart. You don't have that on your planner, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I was gonna ask, so like, was there a moment? And I think for many of us going through things like this, there's always a moment where it's like the light starts to come in again, where we
Yes.
start to I remember just a couple of mine. I would say I had like three turning point moments going through my
Mm,
divorce.
mhm.
And I won't go into all those, right now, but like, did you have any of those where it was like, oh yeah, I know that this was like a milestone moment or a turning point moment?
Yes, absolutely. When I relocated to Atlanta, I joined a running group. And so I started running at 5 a.m. And when you run, you can feel your heart on the inside. And I just knew every morning when I would run, I didn't know what I was running to, but I knew it was something. And
Mm.
so the other powerful turning point was I prayed to God that did I do something to harm my baby? Like I think like any mom, you want to know, like, was it
Mm.
my fault? Was it my fault? And I got the gift of a dream of being by this beautiful ocean and I could see this image and I would know it was God. Like, and carrying my baby like far away, and I was in the water, like trying to get to him. And it was like, mommy, go back, mommy, go back, mommy, go back. And I felt so much peace that I have the best babysitter for my baby, and that I have something to go back to. I didn't know what it was. And I gained a lot of weight during my pregnancy. So I put my head focused on, okay, I'm going to get this weight off. So that was step one. And so that's why I started running. And I posted on Facebook, I publicly lost 70 pounds. And that's when I wrote the book, Rewrite Your Story, because during that time and being in the life coaching space, I met a lot of women. At that point, I had turned 40, who, you know, life hadn't gone as planned. And that's one of the things I write about, like the weight of life not going as planned, because it felt like a weight to me. You know, like this wasn't what I planned. And I have no idea. I felt so disoriented because for the first time, I couldn't work hard to get through this. I truly had to be carried through this. I had to be led through it.
Yes. So good. And, you know, those, I talked to, and you are from the life coach school as well.
Yes.
So Jill Angie is, she's the runner for fat women. We use that word.
Yes.
And she had talked about, we had a conversation about that, about just like how you feel when you're running, like what it does. And I've talked to, I ran during my divorce. I would do a 5K a day. It was just one of the more healing things I did. There was something about that movement that changed my brain to feel like, yes, you're making progress. Yes, it's taking 3 years for this divorce to go through, but you are moving forward. You are making progress.
Exactly. There's, and we know that from the biology, the endorphins, all of that from running, there is runner's high is real. Yeah, it's real. And then running outside with other women. I mean, being in community with other women, I was intentionally, you know, going to build community this time, women I could depend on. And so there's something to all of that. Yes.
So good. So good.
Yes.
So just pivoting a little bit to your remarriage, how long was it between, you know, the divorce and all of these things that happened to when you started dating again? What were your thoughts about even remarrying again?
You know, initially I was like, I'm done with men. And I'm like, obviously God wants me to be a nun. He wants me to just be alone. And I was in a lot of self-loathing and self-pity, right? And so when I came up out of that and I got the weight off, I started having that craving of just like wanting to be with someone. And, you know, again, in my belief system, I was like, okay, I'm a wife. Like I had prayed and it's like, God makes you a wife. A man doesn't make you a wife. God makes you a wife. And so on my 40th birthday, I'll never forget it. I was like, I'm going to date 40 men at my 40th birthday. And so I got a spreadsheet and I numbered it from 1 to 40.
To the spreadsheets.
And I even had a red column for the red flags because I typically would avoid the red flags. And so my therapist helped me get back online. I'll never forget, eHarmony was my first dating site. And so I plugged in all my things that I wanted and I hit enter. I mean, eHarmony is exhaustive. At least it was at that time.
It was. It still is, but it's a different animal now.
Okay. So, and I put all of my criteria and what I wanted. I hit enter, and listen, it said there are 0 men within 100 miles of what you're looking for.
Oh my goodness.
Yes, that's what happened. So the resilience that I wasn't going to stop until I went through at least 40. And so I kept going. And I still didn't meet him at 40. So it took me, I went 2 years after my divorce, didn't date anyone. So year 3, I started dating again. And I was age 40. And it took me 4.5 years of online dating before I met my now husband, love of my life. And that was online.
Yeah. Was it eHarmony or somewhere else?
No, it was not. No. So one morning after my run, I don't know if you ladies can relate to this. I don't know if your audience is mixed, but I saw this beautiful couple on Facebook after I finished running one morning, and their picture just intrigued me. You know how you see some people, you're like, that looks so legit. Like it wasn't like fake. And I clicked on it and they had met on this site, Black People Meet. And I had never heard of Black People Meet. So I said, you know what? And this was like 5 a.m. I said, I'm going to get on Black People Meet. And so I got on Black People Meet and I met my husband that day.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Like, wasn't that all just like a mirror, like you were running,
Four
which
and a
was
half years
has,
later. Right.
yeah, just on, it was your day. It was like the
It was my
appointed
day.
time.
It was my day. And that's what I always tell people. How do you not know? I always tell people now, what if it's going to take 4.5 years and you're at year 4? Don't
Mm,
quit. What if
yeah,
you knew it was going to be 4.5 and you're at 4, you're at 3?
yeah.
Because I did get discouraged. Don't get me wrong. There were
How
times
did
when I
you
would take,
handle that? Because I think when people think about the 4.5 years,
yeah,
they think of it as like 4.5 years of the most terrible experiences for 4.5 years.
right, right. And the thing is, number one, it's a decision. I decided that I would date until 80. Okay.
Mm,
I did.
okay.
I
Yeah.
said, I will give myself that long. I don't know if I'll date consistently until then. And then I'll consider that maybe I heard God wrong. Maybe I didn't hear right. Maybe I got the message mixed up. So that's one thing, is don't set your timeline too tight. And
Mm,
the other thing is, I had a coach through this. I did not do this by
mm,
myself. The emotional calibrations after these dates,
yes.
because when I tell
Yes.
you, I have gone through some stuff. If you want to hear some juicy stories, I got them for you with this online dating stuff. And so there will be times where it would be too much and I'd pull myself off.
Hmm.
But I had a plan and I had a coach. And there were times when I even added a therapist, because like you said, I still had grief in the midst of all of this.
Yeah.
Because people would ask me about, well, why aren't you a mom? And I didn't always want to go into it at that time. It was still very
Hmm.
tender. And so I needed a therapist more for that part. But it was one of those things where it made me who I am. I think, I don't want to go fast forward too much, but it's why I can do business now. I'm incredibly resilient.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. That is amazing. I love that. I just love the um your persistence, and not in a hustle kind of way. You were just
Oh,
like, yeah, no,
absolutely
this is
not.
my path.
This
And
is my
like
path.
you realized you were connected to God. You're like, this is my path. And you just like, I'm just going to stay on this path and I'm just going to walk that path. And I think that's kind of how it translates to me, was you decided
Yes.
and then you
In
just stayed with
collaboration with what
it.
I thought I heard from God. Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
Yes.
100%.
Yes.
So how did you know your husband was the one?
Oh, wow. I went against all the gurus' advice. I think at that time there was some celebrity who had a book like Think Like a Man, Act Like a Lady, something. Well, in that
I
book, the
have all
advice,
kinds of thoughts about
yeah,
all the
that
books
book,
out there.
right?
I actually have not read that book. The title itself, I was like, I don't know, because I don't want to read something and then, you know, be critical in my mind. So I'm just like, I don't know about that book.
Well, one thing I was clear about is I wasn't going to hide that I wanted to get married. And a lot of
Hmm.
the people out there said, don't tell men that you want to get married because you'll scare them away. And this is what I'll say. You can only scare the people who are not for you away. That's it. And so the
Yes.
way I knew my husband, number one, is because I did not hide anything and he did not run.
So good.
He did not. And he looked at my YouTube videos, he looked me up, he did his homework on me. Our
Mm,
first date, we talked for hours. And there were times where I was in Atlanta where there's a lot of bouginess but I would intentionally say, you know what, let's go walk around Walmart. I wanted to see what really mattered to him,
yes.
because I had been in
Yes.
that world with the big houses, the fancy cars, the money, and the emptiness. And
Hmm.
I wanted someone who led with values.
Yeah, that's
And
so good.
and the way I did that was to intentionally say I wanted to go to places that weren't flashy, to see how, because online you get these guys taking pictures in front of Mercedes and all this. I'm like, I don't
Hmm.
care. I have a car. I don't care what kind of car you have. I want to know how where are you going in life?
Right. And, and I tell my clients that sometimes you fall in love with a person because of the environment you interact with that
Exactly.
person in. You think the
Exactly.
person is what's impacting you that way, but it's actually the environment. So if you're always going to the super fancy restaurants
Exactly.
and the
Right.
great vacations, it's a little bit of a bubble and can be a lie. Not that it always is, but it's you need that balance of like, okay, let's make a meal together.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I think that's why we did so well in COVID, because we genuinely love each other's company.
Mm,
And so, I knew he was it because of that. I knew he was it because his love of God. I knew he was it because he could see past, like, I would get an attitude with him sometimes, and as much therapy and coaching as I'd had, I would, looking back, I know I was sabotaging myself because I did, when you believe that it was forever and it wasn't,
Mm.
it takes some mental calibration to believe it again.
Yes.
Because
Yeah.
you've said I do for life before and it wasn't for life.
Yeah.
And you've heard someone say you're the love of my life before and you ended up not being.
Yeah.
And so that chatter was still there. And
Mm.
so he was also, I wanted someone who had baggage like I did, but we were willing to help each other unpack.
Mm.
This
That's
whole,
so
you can't
good.
have bags. No, I have bags. And I needed you to be aware that you got some too.
Yes. And everybody does. Like, I still
Everybody
haven't met the
does.
person who doesn't.
Exactly. If you think you don't have a bag, then that's your first bag right there. So
Right. You're in denial.
you're
Like,
in
you're not a
denial.
human who was
You're
born
in
of
denial.
humans, and there is nothing. Because in fact, like I said, the denial itself
Is baggage.
is baggage. It's a coping mechanism for stuff you have trained yourself not to see.
That's exactly right. And so if you have a need to escape into these, like you said, beautiful things, let's go to Dubai, let's go to that. I have my own money. I can do that. I want to know, can you sit here and talk to me? Can we disagree?
Yeah.
How are you with conflict? How are you with challenge? How much are you willing to fight for this?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. So
Because
good.
you're not going to like me every day and I'm not going to like you. Who are we when we don't like each other?
That's the truth.
That's the truth.
How long did you date? So from the time you met to the time you, it
Got
sounds like
married?
both of you are pretty much on the same wavelength from the
we were on the
beginning,
same wavelength.
or
Yes.
like from getting married, like.
We dated 6 months before I met him in June. He proposed in October. We were married in March, and that was 9 years ago.
Wow.
Yes.
So good. So about a year from end
About
to
a
end.
year. Yeah, from end to end. A little less than a year, from 1 June to March. So yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I wanted to go back a little bit and just ask about, like, even just your healing process, because you had a lot to heal. And, I hear a lot of women talking about how, well, you got to heal first, but like,
oh, absolutely
you
not.
don't have this definition. And that can be true as long as you define what that means to you, what that looks like, because we're always healing.
Exactly. Right. I love the way you said that. You're always healing. And the layer that needed to heal for me to know that I was moving forward is that I could love my husband, that I could release him in love. For me, that meant I'm healed, meaning that I wanted the best for him, knowing it didn't include me, that I had no wish for any kind of life of us together. And I also didn't have regret. It was completely buttoned up that I could move forward.
Oh, that's so good. And I think that having that definition of this is my definition of what it means to heal before I date.
That's what it meant for me.
Really helps us. And then I think it helps define the work that needs to be done. I think a lot of people are just like, I'm doing the work. And I had this conversation before, not to knock this person because they just didn't know. And I said, hey, you said you're doing the work and dating isn't working for you. What do you mean by doing the work? And they were like, well, I meditate every morning. And I'm like, honey, I meditate too. But like, if you've gone through a divorce, especially the kind you're describing to me, that is not going to cut it.
Oh, absolutely not. Absolutely not. No, I had to do a lot of identity work. Like my worth was challenged through what I went through. And I had to look at that my worthiness was from God and not my status of not being a mother or a wife, as much as I valued both of those titles. So all of that work was the deeper work that I did with a coach, the deeper work of who am I, even if someone ghosts me on a date. That's the reason I could go into those dating scenarios and, be ghosted and, be told I'll call you tomorrow and never hear from them. And the list goes on and on of what I went through, but it's because I was grounded in me. And I truly came to a place for the first time in my life, actually in my 40s, of loving my own company. If I was home alone on a Friday, I could do it.
Yeah.
I could go to a restaurant alone and not feel sad about it. That was healing for me. Now there's deeper healing that, like, I thought I was a lot more healed than I was until I got married with my husband, because and I don't want to get ahead of the interview, but
So you're good.
I just want to say, like, some of the healing was in the being married again, because
Mhm.
I didn't realize how much I would be triggered by certain things. Like, for example, if I couldn't reach my husband, he at the time worked in downtown Atlanta, and we didn't live downtown, so it's a commute. If I couldn't reach him, I would instantly think, oh, he's with someone else,
Mhm.
because that had been my history.
Yeah.
And he would walk in the door and I'd be mad. And so I really
Yeah.
had to work on that. It wasn't him that I was angry with. I still had work to do on trust.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And our brains, I mean, we have those well-worn neural
Oh,
pathways. So it's
yes.
just like it is work to redirect the brain to
Yes.
choosing to trust. People say, yeah, I want to choose to trust and open my heart. And I'm like, yeah, but that it's not a switch that you flip.
Oh, it's not. And you know what? The biggest thing about trust, I want to speak to that, because I came to a place where, because I had to really come to the point of, well, what if it does happen again, you know, in my new marriage? Well, what I trust now, well, first, who I trust is God, and what I trust is my ability.
Mhm.
That's
Yes.
it, because
Yeah.
I've gone through it. And when you
Yeah.
remind yourself that not only did I go through that, I grew through that, and now I'm thriving on the other side of it. I wrote a book about it. It changed my whole career path. Then that's what I trust.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
what I trust.
The thought that I used in those scenarios was always like, whatever happens, I can handle it.
I can handle it, and I
Yeah.
will make it, because I've like you said, those psychological scales, I've endured the most painful one that any woman can endure.
Yeah.
I've done it.
Yes. That's so, so good. So now, like you've been married 9 years now.
Yes. In March, it'll
How
be
do
9.
you,
Yes.
yeah, how do you like what is the I don't want to say vision, that sounds like a little like super fancy, but like because your idea of family
Mhm.
was one thing. How
Yes.
has that changed, or how do you view that now? How do you feel like, oh yeah, this is my value isn't in this union or this beautiful, obviously beautiful. I mean, I follow you on Facebook. Y'all are beautiful, but it's from what you're telling me, it's a different kind of beautiful from what you were building before.
Oh my gosh. Listen, I have a helicopter mom. And so there's no doubt I would have been a helicopter mom to those 3 boys, and no one would know me other than those 3 boys. Okay. So, so what I know is that God had a different intention and impact. And so together, my husband and I mean, he's a pastor. Our purpose together is bigger than we ever could have had individually. And
Mm,
I love that I get to help other women be better moms. So that's how I get pieces. In my book, I talk about like asking for, how can I still get what I really wanted without it being the way I thought it needed to be. And
oh,
one of the
so
things I
good.
wanted through my son was to share all of the lessons from my parents and all of that. And so now I do that in a very different way, through ministry, through
Mhm.
coaching. I am so open to family being, people I don't even know that cross my
Yeah,
path. I'm much more, I've been expanded because of that. I like to say,
yeah.
when, you're the mommy to an angel, your heart is in heaven. And so it's like you live in between that space from
Mhm.
heaven and earth. It's so expansive.
Yes. Yeah. So it's
It
like,
can,
like
it can include a
literally,
lot.
it's your perspective on things
It's so
has to
different.
be different.
It has to be, but then at the same time, now that I'm in my 50s, and I coach women who their children are going to college, like, I went through that journey of, we all have to let our children go.
Yeah.
Mine was just very early. We all have to learn who we are without our children. Mine was just very
Mm,
early. We
yeah.
all have to redefine, like, what is it going to be now that they're gone? My gone is with Jesus, but other people's gone is married, or they're in another country, or,
Yeah.
and so I see really how similar we are. That's what
Mm,
that's because this story is 13 years old. I want to say that. So it's very different. Um, my perspective about family, about life, about the urgency of doing what you love,
mm.
all different and changed because of that season.
Yeah. That's so
Yeah.
good. So let me ask you, what is important? Like, you said the urgency of doing what you love, like from your perspective, especially for women, just in general, because like
Yes.
obviously you work with women, people socialized as women. And we get told a lot of like, this is what's important.
Right.
Depending on
Right.
what family you came from. My family was like, okay, you go to college,
Oh,
you get
yes.
your graduate degree, you get married, but you have to meet your husband before you graduate so that it all works in this time, like all of that. And then some other women are like, nope, men are dogs,
Right.
get your bag. Like we're constantly getting messages. And then when with your kids, then your kids are a reflection of you. Like, what is actually important? What's important for women to know?
What's important for us to know is that none of those titles, mom, wife, sister, daughter, all of those things, those are all loans. You have to know that it's all a loan. It's all temporary. And so what's important is like we're stewards of these loans, whether it's our children, our husbands, our parents, and being present with the fact that it's all temporary helps you to get over what really matters. And what really matters is our experiences with each other, our contribution. It matters to me that I make people's lives better, that I'm better, that I'm allowing my character to be transformed, that I have the fruit of the spirit, love, kindness, peace, joy, all those things, that's what I intentionally bring to every space. That's what matters. Because people remember how you made them feel more than anything else.
So true. That is so, so true. Oh my goodness. What an amazing, amazing story.
Yeah.
What an amazing story. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. I'm even just like, I'm looking at my questions and I'm like, I don't know, like, it's all just like, I'm like, we're going like 10 different directions.
Sure.
But I wanted to ask, like, is there like, what would you, and I've kind of sort of asked you about your message, but if you wanted to, like, and it might be different messages, maybe one for women who are divorcing or one for women who are, dating, those who are remarried. Like, what is your advice for just those of us in that community of women going through this particular type of journey?
So the first thing I will say is that don't make conclusions in the dark. So if and what I mean by dark is it's not what you planned. If you're filing for divorce, going through divorce, be very slow to label this time and make conclusions that you just don't know yet. You just don't know. And to be in that space of allowing yourself to be transported to the next phase and to know that you can't drive yourself into your purpose. You're going to have to evolve into it and do the work. And so that's what I'll say. And that you're going to know when you have that ache for love again in a healthy way, not to rescue you from your pain, but because you have so much love to share. That's another thing. I did not want to get married again because I didn't like being single. It's because I have so much love. I have an abundance of love, and I couldn't imagine just taking that to my grave. And that's why you want to get married because of what to give, not what you can get and what you can do together that you couldn't do apart. And not because you're less than, but because you are more than enough.
So good.
So that none of those attachments, whether it's a husband or a baby, they don't add to you. They just, are a part of the things you get on the loan. We all have these little life contracts and what's written in the contract. We all get different things.
Yeah.
And be slow to look at other people's contract and think that because for a long time I thought, why am I being punished? What did I do wrong? I thought, God, did I do something to bring this on me? And absolutely not. I want you to know that sometimes we can do the best we can and things still blow up. So I just want to speak to the type A performers like me, who you're used to, like, you're thinking if I could have done this, or maybe if I talked to him differently, or, I used to think if I didn't gain weight during the pregnancy, that maybe he wouldn't have gone to see that other girl and she was prettier and she looked better, and all those mental gymnastics that sometimes we as women do. They all have a theme of not enoughness and inadequacy. And I just want to say you are enough as is. And it's not your responsibility if someone didn't recognize that.
Yes. Yes. And same with dating.
Same with dating.
Decides that they're going to cancel the date at the last minute.
Oh my gosh.
Recognize your worth.
they don't recognize it. And this is the thing. You have to get clear on the fact that my husband would never ghost me on a date. I'll never forget, because I would always like get my nails done, my hair done to go on a date. Now, I
Mm.
always wanted to physically show up the best I could. And I remember going to this beautiful restaurant in Atlanta. And so we got seated, and this guy, we had been talking for a while, and I was really excited to meet him. He was an attractive guy, and he said, okay, I'll be right back. And so I'm sitting and I'm waiting and I'm waiting. And the waitress comes up. She was like, do you want to order? I was like, no, I'm waiting for my date. And she was like, I don't know how to tell you this, but he took an Uber.
Oh my goodness.
And so, you know how your lip just starts shaking at the top because you're about to cry, because you're like, he literally just left me there in the restaurant. And
Mm.
I'm trying to hold it together while leaving. But this is the sentence I'm offering you, to entering like the stages. Because if you're in that getting back out there stage, these things happen. And
Yes, they do.
the thought that helped me in those times was, my husband would never treat me that way. So there's no way this guy was my husband. He wasn't it.
Yes. Yes, 100%. I call it, when I'm coaching my clients, I call it the love story.
Mm.
So like when they're having FOMO about some guy, or they are, I don't know, whatever the situation is, I'm like, but would this be your love story? The love story you're going to tell when we're done
No.
working together. Is this guy a part of that love story?
I
Is this
love that.
situation a part of that love story?
I love that. No
Obviously
way are you going to
not.
say, oh, he was my husband. He stood me up in that restaurant and never called me again. Then we got married somehow in a
Somehow,
mystical
then I
way.
saw him, I bumped into him somewhere, and then I like, no.
Exactly. Oh my God, is that my dog? So yeah.
Yeah.
So if you're in that phase, I want you to know that, have the thought of like, no, the person I'm meant for wouldn't treat me this way. So I
Mm.
used to like love that something would happen. Well, not love it, but my thought about it was, I want it to happen quickly. I want to turn them off quickly. If there's something about
Mhm.
me that they don't like, I hope I do it quickly.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I love for my clients to do it right there in their profile. I'm like, what are we going to put in your profile to make sure all the guys you don't want
Exactly.
don't swipe right.
Don't swipe right. Like I want to get married. And so if that was not something that they could do, then good. And some people would call
Yes.
me desperate. Like
Oh, yeah.
good. Okay.
Yeah, because you
Thanks
were
for sharing.
never
Thanks for
interested in
sharing.
marrying
Yes.
someone.
Thanks for sharing. Thanks for
Yeah.
sharing. Yes.
So good. Oh my
Yes.
gosh. Cledra, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for
Thank you.
sharing so vulnerably and so openly.
Yes.
What do your clients typically work with you on? Like, who is your typical client? What do you work on? And then we'll talk about where they can find you.
Sure. So my clients right now, what I work on, I work with Christian women who are business owners, and in two ways. Some of them want to reinvent themselves like I did coming out of corporate, and they want to start their own brand because they too have gone through a story like mine, and they want to build this personal brand to help other women. And then I have clients who own businesses and are solopreneurs, but they are exhausted at the end of the day. Because I've done that, lots of money and a horrible personal life, I'm big on having a prosperous life and business.
Yes.
So we work on, what does that look like for both aspects of you to thrive? Taking care of your body, taking care of your mind, taking care of your relationships.
Yeah. So good.
Yes. So not just the money, the business being profitable, but what does a profitable life look like for you? And how does your life feel? Because so many women, their life looks good, but it doesn't feel good. So we work on your life feeling good too.
That is the truth.
It's the truth.
That is the truth.
It's the truth. So that's what I work on now. And what was the second part of your question? Because I'm trying to overtalk my
how
dog
can
here.
they find you? I think
Cledra.com.
I think we answered the first two. Like, so if someone wanted to connect with you, find you, work with you, I don't know, well, whatever, just where can they find you on social media or otherwise?
Absolutely. I am Cledra on all social media. So Cledra.com is my website, and Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. Those are the three places I typically live online. So you could find me at all of those places. So
awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your time with the
Thank you for
audience
having
today.
me.
Such a great story. All right, listeners. I hope you have felt and learned as much as I did on this episode. Thank you all for your time and attention, and we will see you next time.